my client's wife carried my son, and he just had the biggest diaper blowout you could possibly imagine. Yeah. But, and here's the whole thing, I still got the sale. My coaching practice started with a diaper blowout. You have to discern between who you are versus who other people think you should want to be or who they say you are. I can tell you the same thing. I could say take a day off. I could tell you, eat well, exercise, meditate, blah, blah, blah. But here's what I'm going to say, because I think this is the truth. At the end of the day, if you don't take care of yourself, your family's going to have to take care of you.
All right, greetings all. Welcome back to Living Once Twice, the place where we rewrite narratives, reinvent ourselves, and reimagine our lives. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Before we dive in, please be sure to subscribe, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and give us a follow on Instagram at Living Once Twice, where you can learn more about our great content and information on all of our guests, including the guest that I'm really excited to bring on today, which is Melissa Llarena. Melissa is an imagination coach, consultant, speaker, author, and contributor to ForbesWomen articles that have garnered over 4 million plus views. Melissa is also the host of Unimaginable Wellness, the podcast for entrepreneurs, founders, and creators who are moms. Featured guests include GaryVee, Suzy Batiz, among others. Melissa also holds a psychology degree from NYU, an MBA from the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, and a Transformational Coaching Academy certificate, and is on the road to becoming a meditation practitioner. Be sure to read her debut self-help book for creative moms entitled Fertile Imagination, a guide for stretching every mom's superpower for maximum impact, coming out in October 2023. Melissa also lives in Austin, Texas with her husband and 3 sons. Melissa, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Justin, what an amazing intro. What an amazing host. I am so excited. I know that this is going to be a value jam-packed conversation. I just know it. So thank you, Justin, for this opportunity. I am excited and I am doing well.
Good. And I'm right there with you. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. And then for our listeners who might be like, wait a minute, that voice sounds so familiar. That is correct. Melissa was a guest in season 4, episode 40. And at that time, Melissa was living in Australia. And Melissa, I told you before we started recording, just thank you for being such a huge support in my journey, my podcasting journey, my coaching journey. And so when I say that you have just so much genius to offer to our listeners, like folks, I am just a huge testament to that. And so I'm really excited for all the insight that you're going to share, because there's so many places that I want to go today. I want to talk about everything from some of the mindset and limiting beliefs that moms carry about themselves that hold them back, but then also more importantly, how your book and a lot of things that you do with your coaching clients, how can moms reignite that fire, that passion in themselves that they had long before motherhood, that transition took place?
Yeah, Justin, there is so much to be said pertaining to this topic. And yeah, anyone that heard me before on your podcast, it's me again. And make pretend that I am a new person because I just went through a pivot. It's funny, when I launched the podcast, originally my own podcast, it went under the name An Interview with Melissa Llarena, and it was launched because of a dare. And the dare, that story, I might have shared during the first conversation, but obviously, as a Latina mom does, I was making rice and beans, and my husband was like, oh my gosh, there's this dare out there from GaryVee. Launch a podcast, he'll be on your show. And so it was. Not that easy, but so it was. And so for me, since I had launched in 2017, my podcast originally, which was just like general sort of, inspiration, motivation, all these entrepreneurs, when the pandemic hit, that was the moment when I decided, okay, I want something else. I want to have a conversation that is closer to something that I can relate to For example, here I was with three little boys in the homeschooling moment. It's so funny. I meant to say homescholding moment. Maybe it was, right? For a lot of us, right? Synonymous, both words. But it was that time when I said, okay, wait, I want to have a conversation that's about bubble wrapping my sanity. And I think a
Mm,
lot of us can really relate to that, even if you don't have kids. Like if you had to do college virtually, like I'm sure there were moments that you're just like, I'm going insane. I need some sort of like calming agent. I need to take care of my health and wellness. And those are the topics that I'm tackling on my podcast now, Unimaginable Wellness, for moms who are doing two things, well, really several, that have very high expectations. So that's being an entrepreneur and being a mom. I can't think of any other role where the expectations are quite as high.
mm. This is really good to kind of hear more of that context about what led you to the journey of evolving your podcast. And I guess where I want to kind of talk to and pivot to next is the book and the story behind the book. I know that you shared, Melissa, that the book, the journey to writing the book was about a 2-year journey. And so I'd love to hear you share just more about that process and what that was like, especially too for moms that are going to really resonate with your story and wondering, well, hey, I've got a book inside of me. How do I get this out? So also like any insights that they can learn from your journey of writing this book and bringing it to fruition.
I love that question because I think, whenever someone decides to put content out there, there's always a backstory. And seldom do we get to hear that story, right? It's like, wait a minute, what was going on in your mind as you were piecing together that piece of content or that book or like that movie, that documentary, whatever it might be for you? And so for me, I remember again, deep in the pandemic, I was physically based in Australia. And for anyone that doesn't know, which might be a lot of the listeners right now, my family and I relocated from the United States to Australia. We already had our three kids, and there was no reason for us to go to Australia at the time. It was like this family adventure. And back then, I didn't know that there were going to be all these like global milestones happening while we were living abroad. But what I did know was that I needed to do something that would put me in a position where I didn't have to face rejection from clients on the phone. I didn't have to execute on delivering coaching solutions at these odd time zone, really random hours, since I was in Australia and my clients would have been, for the most part, in the US. And it was at that moment, for a myriad of circumstances, that I said, you know what? I've always wanted to write a book. And it was as uneventful as any mom could imagine. Like I was sitting on the sofa, maybe watching one of those reality shows where you get married to somebody without knowing them, like within 24 hours, and then you figure it out. And I literally just told my husband, I was like, I think I want to pause my coaching services and focus on writing a book. I didn't know it was going to be for moms. However, and it was funny because Justin and I were just talking about this before recording, but I really did decide to surrender myself in that moment in terms of to whom the book would be for. I literally prayed about it. Like I had this like moment of stillness when I was looking at a non-blank page, because I never suffered with a blank page issue. And I just remember thinking to myself, who am I going to write to that is going to get me to overcome the challenges of writing a book? That's going to get me, or give me that perseverance and tenacity that's necessary to complete such a big project while I was homeschooling my three kids. Like, who's this person I can write for that's going to keep me going? And at that moment, I had to decide, because the book would have been horrible if I didn't have a target audience. But I had to decide, and the thought was just like, okay, I'm writing for moms. I'm writing for moms who are like me, moms who feel like they lost their sense of imagination, moms for whom their imagination is their life force, moms for whom having this like spirit, this childlike spirit inside of them is a necessity, not a nice to have. And also the greatest source of power as it relates to showing our children how it's done, how you pursue a dream, how you fall down and get back up again, how to stop yourself from self sabotaging yourself, and how to stop seeing yourself as an imposter, and also how to heal with that relationship that a lot of us have with even calling ourselves creative or imaginative. And so for me, when I made that choice to just accept that I'm writing this book for a target audience that I have never served in this sort of coaching perspective, like for me, it was like, okay, I'll run miles for that person. I'll run miles for that person. And I have had to fly kilometers for that person from Australia to the US because, as with a lot of things, the book writing process took way longer than I anticipated, and a lot of it was, because I wanted to find the right person to help me. And for that too was an intuitive choice, which I also write about a bit in the book, which is about how to make decisions and all that stuff. So these are things that moms struggle with. And these are conversations I've had one on one with mom friends. And I thought to myself, why not come up with a guide that's going to be really end to end. So starting with like waking up this imagination, which mine was like almost in a coma essentially, and then playing with your imagination. So that's about doing things that are different, exciting, unusual. And then the book ends in terms of its third part, which is stretching your imagination. And that's kind of where, as moms, we want to duplicate ourselves. And the way we do that is by mobilizing our network. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with having like a drink after work. It just has to do with making a decision to find the mom hack that we all can come up with for other people, but in the pursuit of our dreams.
Mm, I really appreciate you offering kind of the journey to it. And it was so interesting hearing you talk about how like you surrendered,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it sounds like it does start to become clear of like the audience best for you to serve is one in which you've walked the shoes because you're a mom 3 times over yourself. And I love kind of this hero journeys as you were describing kind of how the book is set up of helping moms who've lost that sense of themselves go through this journey of reclaiming that, refining that, and that trust in themselves because they've gone through this identity kind of crisis. And it's something I've heard you talk about and I've heard you coach clients about is this struggle of this identity crisis or moms struggling with the script of motherhood. And so I was hoping, Melissa, because you've shared, you're a mom of 3 boys. Can you take us back through your own journey and like, how did motherhood impact you? Like, did you subscribe to the script of motherhood? How did you lose your own struggle or sense of identity in your own journey of motherhood?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would say that it started when I had my first son. And so I have 3 little boys, and the first one is a singleton, and you'll only know that term if you're familiar with like twins. So my second set of sons are identical twins. So my firstborn, he definitely shocked me, but I will say that the twins super shocked me, so it's all on a range there. But when I had my firstborn, I had completed my MBA at Tuck about a year earlier. I had been working in an agency in Dumbo, Brooklyn, huge, and I was doing what I was supposed to be doing as an ambitious go-getter person. And what I realized was when I had my baby, something changed. And like it's biological, like our brain structures inside, like stuff really changes when you become a mom. And what I thought was really interesting was that I felt like at that time when I quit my agency role, I was almost like throwing my dreams, my MBA, my goals in like a trash bin. The reason why I say that is because I felt like, how am I going to go like so hard towards my goals if I've never done this before with this split sort of mentality? Let me explain. A lot of moms, we feel like we're split. It's kind of like, okay, I'm at the office, but I want to be at home. I'm at home, but I want to be at school. Notice I didn't say at the office, but I'm sure there's moms that want to be at the office because for us, it's a quote unquote sometimes break. But
Mm.
either way, you don't want to be where your feet are. And so for me, I felt that, okay, I've never done that before. I've never like, gotten an A plus and had to feed a kid at the same time. Or I've never had to deliver a workplace report and, stay up all night. And so for me, I just feel like I was very all or nothing all my life before becoming a mom. And now here I was with a child and I didn't know how to like be in that same sort of mind frame as a mom. It's like, I don't know how to go after a goal at night when my child is asleep. I don't know how to go after a goal and, watch my child do X, Y, or Z, whatever that might be. Like it just felt really, I felt conflicted. So that was a bit of the identity crisis. That was kind of like a shattering, I would say, of the old me. So the new me was, okay, I have a baby and I spent 6 months with him, staring at him, probably like literally staring at him. And I remember saying to myself, I can't do only this. Like, I just could not do only this. So, there's a bit of a restlessness inside of me. So, if you're a restless person, like the book, you'll get it. But there was a restlessness inside. So, 6 months in, I was like, okay, so I know what flexibility looks like in a corporate setting. It is a figment of my imagination. This was before hybrid work. This was before, big Zoom stuff, right? So that wasn't where I wanted to explore my skills and talents. So at the time I said, I'm opening up a business. I'm opening up a career coaching practice. Went on to like, good old legal Zoom and I got my first client. And that moment for me was what it's been all about ever since over the last 12 years. The moment that me and my firstborn was on an ergo baby carrier on my chest. I was taking the New York City trains, heading to Midtown, meeting my prospective client with his wife. My client's wife carried my son, and he just had the biggest diaper blowout you could possibly imagine. Yeah, but, and here's the whole thing, I still got the sale. My coaching practice started with a diaper blowout, and I would say it's been interruptions and smelly adventures ever since. And for me, that was my solution. If I was going to do it, I was going to have to do it messy anyways. And for
Mm.
that you need an imagination, but it's hard to imagine anything if you can't even imagine yourself sleeping. So in come the twins about 2 years later. With the twins, I think that's when my imagination just said, I'm out of here, because I was not sleeping. And at the same time, I was just kind of like, I mean, I had fumes coming out of my ears that first year. And I read about it in the book. That first year, I wanted to tandem nurse my twins, which a lot of people were like, you're crazy. And that first year, like there was a lot of like family tragedy. My stepmother had passed away that year. So I had to go to the funeral and all that. My own mom has manic depression, and she had to be in a psych ward for a year because she was toxic with her meds. So that year for me was like the year where I had to just, I had to survive. I had to survive, and I had to help other people survive. So, the signs of my imagination, they were like nowhere to be found. And so that's why it took time for me to say, you know what? I need it back because I felt a little dead inside. Without my imagination, I didn't feel like myself. That was the crisis, I would say. And that's why I wrote the book. I was almost like secretly writing the book for myself. It's not a secret. I actually put
Mm,
that in the introduction. But it was one of those like, I need to find this because this makes me happy. When I have these like visions that are things that aren't usually intended for moms, but I want to secretly do, I get the most excitement. I get juice out of that. And then when I pursue these visions and make them real, like I'm just like higher than a kite. So for me, it's like if I'm going to lose that, I lose myself, and it's not worth it.
mm. And what sticks out as the end, as you were just sharing, well, what brings you joy? Like seeing it in your face, in your emotional expression of just how much that passion brings life to you. What also sticks out, Melissa, as you were just sharing the identity crisis of this whole feeling like you had to throw all of your dreams and your hopes and your goals in the trash basket, you had to almost rewrite that narrative that it was either all or nothing. You could either be a mom but you can't be these other things. And through your process of rewriting that, you reinvented yourself. And I know that took time, but people are always about hearing your story like, oh, okay, how do I get on that path? Is there a process that I could take advantage of or explore to get myself back on that path of reigniting that passion inside of me? And in the book you share, I know you mentioned the process you have called my imagination to impact method. And so I was wondering if you could just kind of highlight some aspects or stages of that, of how moms can kind of tap back into and access their joy and imagination again through that method.
Absolutely. So it's so interesting. Like, if you've ever considered writing a book, I will say that things they get put together at the very end. Like, it all ends up making sense when you are totally done. And so that method, right? Imagination to impact method was something that I realized at the tail end of my 2-year journey of writing my book. I came to the conclusion that there was this way of approaching life that I was then sharing with clients in a coaching setting that was really creating and generating results. And not just results as in, I got the job, I asked for this or that. It was like, no, it was creating this like energy in the person, almost like I lit them up, like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm doing this. Some would say outrageous sort of outcomes, right? Okay, a client literally said outrageous. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm a little outrageous. So, the imagination to impact method, for anyone that's interested in just kind of considering this journey, it really starts with, mindset work, which is not new in terms of the coaching space. But what I will say, the approach that I apply is very, very candid. And I feel like, radical candor is something that is essential. So you have to know yourself. And here's where you have to untangle what ends up being a really big knot, kind of like the knot I had literally in the back of my curly hair this morning. So you have to discern between who you are versus who other people think you should want to be, or who they say you are. And that's very difficult under several circumstances. And that's why in the beginning of my book, I dedicate a third of my book to this concept. And so it's really about, trusting yourself. It's about, having a method to making decisions that's true to who you are. It's about distinguishing, what it means to be a mom, or if you're not a mom, what it means to be a daughter, a sister, a friend, versus, what you want those things to mean and how you want to play out those roles. So it's really about untangling, what's coming from the outside versus what's true on the inside, right? So that's step one. If I wanted to be super tactical, in the book, I have these imagination warm up prompts. So they're like journal questions. So, what I would suggest, and I know we're super digital here, but I really believe in physically writing down some journal answers. So, you might want to ask yourself, for example, if there was no one on this planet, who would I be? How would I be? And what would I be after? What would you be pursuing? If there was no one to judge you, if there was no one to tell you who you should be or what you should do in the next 6 months, what is it that you would actually do? And that might be like step one. There's lots of chapters in this book that talk about this idea. And for moms, we have this extra layer because there is this pull. We're being pulled by the heartstrings by our kids. That's one side of it. But we're also being pulled by the maternal ancestors, or these, people from like our grandmothers and like our aunts and like our own mothers. And those relationships are so emotional that they end up being quite irrational if you really look at them deeply. So that's the first step, right? So try that journal prompt physically with your hand. That actually provides therapeutic sort of benefits as well. That's why I am so about writing things down. The second step in that method is really about, okay, so this is who I want to be. So how can I play with this concept? How can I try on this new role? How can I put myself in situations where I'm going to be stretched, right? So let's just imagine, okay, I want to be a writer, let's say, right? You have a book in your heart, you want to be a writer, and that's what you would do if you knew no one was going to no one was going to say something negative about your writing. If no one existed on the planet, you're just writing, but somehow you're like an automatic millionaire. So anyway, you're writing a book. Step two, okay, I want to be a writer. This is the play with your imagination part. This is the second section of the book and the second piece of this method. So then you would want to play with that concept. Well, okay, what time would a writer wake up in the course of your day? What would they do first? It's, as far as they're a writer, they would sit down at a desk, they would open up a Microsoft Word. None of this is like exciting, but this is the reality of writing, right? Or maybe they'll go to a cafe and they'll be like in Paris and they'll be around where all these other famous writers were, and you're people watching, gathering insights or looking to see if you find characters in the street. Right now you're playing with the real you and how you want to actually be. That's the second piece of it. For moms, this is the best part, because a lot of moms, they say, oh, I can't do that, I can't go and like join Cirque du Soleil. I interviewed someone that literally worked at Cirque du Soleil. That's why I say it. um,
Mm.
but I even provide in the book ways to de-risk this sense of playfulness for a mom. I'm not saying you have to like quit your job of being a mom. I'm just saying let's be a little more creative and let's come up with other ways to play with new identities or new ways of being or new goals you want to pursue. So that's the second part. And the third part would be, okay, now stretch your imagination. Understanding that moms, when we need something for our kids, we will go to the ends of the earth in order to execute on what we need for our children, whether it's a certain educational plan because they have different learning abilities, whether it's a tutor because they're not doing so well in math. Well, this is what the third part of this method suggests. It says, okay, you do this for your kids, you ask for help for your kids, you look for a village for your kids. Well, hello, let's do it for ourselves. Let's do it for ourselves. So, what does that mean? Yes, we're going to network. And guess what? We're creative enough to figure out how to network without having to go to a bar or be on a golf course. I am so confident in moms being creative about that. And also, having, and I write about this in the book, I interviewed an executive director or executive producer of Billions, having someone as your personal fan, like, Do you know how many moms like basically scream to the top of their lungs when they're watching like a soccer game for their kids? Like we are the fans of our kids. We are the fans of our partners. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if you had a little kid looking at you and being like, "Go mom, go." That's a personal fan. That'll get me to do a lot of things, or a partner. So for me, it's like my husband. It's like, go, Melissa, launch a podcast, get GaryVee on your podcast. Work for me, right?
Hmm.
So I include that in the book. So those are the three stages of the method. I would say that they're very much so like a choose your adventure sort of method. And when I've coached clients, the one thing that ends up being off the table, because I'm a mom with three kids who has been through some stuff, is excuses. Like that's the one thing. Like it's like, no, no, no. Together, let's use our fertile imaginations and let's think about how we could do this in a way that feels correct for you and how you want a mother, and also is going to drive the results you need in the way that you use your skills and help and contribute to the world.
Thank you for outlining that and giving people, again, a process for what they take. And just in listening to you, going and just kind of walking through it, of the first, you talked about how mindset work is so important here. And I completely agree with you, because I feel like a lot of times that's what kind of keeps us stuck, is that imposter syndrome or these old narratives that we hold about ourselves. So sharing with moms, like, first, envision it out, take away all the barriers. If you could kind of envision your life, what would you want to do with it with no limitations? And then starting to like envision and walk within that, stretching yourself comfort wise as you go through that process of whether you were saying like, well, what would a writer do going to a cafe and things of that nature. And then kind of the end part of finding and tapping into your tribe, into your community, to also support you in that venture. I think as you outline it, that helps moms to really develop the momentum to sustain themselves, to carry themselves through the journey, but to also carry themselves through the mental challenges. Because something I've heard you talk about is how the imposter syndrome, it doesn't go away. Those narratives don't necessarily go away, but you need to take action to continue to just kind of sustain yourself through those periods of time where the mind creeps back up. And so there was something you shared towards the end there too, Melissa, about how as a mom, you'll go to the end of the earth for your kids, and or you're sacrifice and put everyone else above yourself. And so I guess before we go into each one teach one, I guess I wanted to hear more about the aspect of mindfulness around health and moms not taking their own health for granted. And I know there's stories of like Esther, and even your own, you shared a health scare that you, a cold that you let prolong for too long. But anything that you want to offer to moms out there who are suffering with their own nourishment or their own self-care, because again, they're prioritizing everyone else's goals and dreams, but not their own.
Yeah, I think, to be really, really candid here, because I think I've heard it all before, right? When it comes to self care, burnout, stress, all this stuff for moms, we've been told like take the bubble bath or take the time off or sleep when the kids are sleeping, which I never did because that's not me. Like, I'm going to optimize if my kids are sleeping. And, for me, it's like, I can tell you the same thing. I could say take a day off. I could tell you, eat well, exercise, meditate, blah, blah, blah. But here's what I'm going to say, because I think this is the truth. At the end of the day, if you don't take care of yourself, your family's going to have to take care of you. And no one's going to figure it out either. It has to be you, listener. And this is irrespective if you're a mom or you're not a mom. If you're, for example, someone who right now, pulled all nighters because you had some final exams, I want to just say that you are not what's the right word, indestructible, right? You're not indestructible. At the same time, if you neglect yourself, like, someone is going to have to pick up the pieces. And if you literally want to support your family, you have to take that responsibility for yourself. So ultimately, I could say do the bubble bath thing, the meditate thing, the eat well thing. But at the end of the day, I've seen so many moms suffer so much, and the reason why they suffer is because they're hurt. There's something inside that has not been addressed. They were either malnourished, not well slept, they didn't speak their truth, and that's another one, emotional burdens too, and emotional health. you know it might not be something that you see, right? But if someone is struggling emotionally with some sort of like familial conflicts and things like that, these are burdens that a lot of moms I've spoken to really struggle with. And so, from a neglect perspective, not addressing some of these emotional burdens that no one else sees is also a form of neglect. But at the end of the day, it's up to you, the person listening right now, irrespective if you're a mom or not, but it's up to you. There is no one that is going to say to you, you know what? Stop and sleep or rest or close your eyes or pray or, ask for help. There's no one's going to do this for you. And so it's important as a mom to really understand that you think you might be like, hacking the system of life, but ultimately, if you are not caring for yourself first, your family is going to have to carry you. And as a daughter to someone that has had manic depression, I know what that's like, and it's not a good look. It is not a good look, and no mom would want that. So, whether you're doing it because you want to feel joy, vibrant, and just like healthy and well, that's one side of it. But at least do it for your kids and your family, so that this way you don't fall apart, because I'm telling you, you don't want your family to have to piece you back together. So at least prevent that, if nothing else.
Melissa, that is some real advice. And I just thank you for making that just so clear that it all starts with moms. Like they can't sacrifice themselves for someone else, because at the end of the day, yeah, it catches up, and to have that burden then pass along to their family. Obviously, that's not the goal and the intention for any mom. So thank you for just reiterating the importance of them prioritizing their own nourishment, their own self-care, their own preservation, their own healing, as I know you talk about too in the book. So going out to our Each One Teach One section, since Melissa, you are our first returning guest, I'm changing up the questions a little bit here so you're not answering the same ones that listeners will have heard you answer in the past. So the first question that I have for you is actually, because you're a mom of three kiddos in school, what is one thing about life that you think should be taught in school that currently isn't?
Hmm. Resilience. Resilience. I think when you fall down, I think right now we feel embarrassed. It's like embarrassing to fail, embarrassing to, not succeed. And I think that needs to be addressed proactively. And I also think we need to let kids actually fail, so that you can actually build that confidence in them and have them get up on their own. So that would be the topic. That would be a
Mm,
big topic.
nope, good offering there. And I know in the book you talk about, with some of the guests, building up your inner reserve, your inner resilience as well. So I'm sure that's something the listeners will be able to learn from and take from. Second question for you is, what's the biggest piece of advice that you were given as a mom that you found out to be untrue?
Hmm. So this actually comes from my own mom, but it's because of her circumstances. And so I would say she always said, don't don't stress yourself too much. She always said, don't stress yourself too much. And the reason why she said it is because anyone that has a mental illness, like, you're tender, and you can definitely get into an episode here or there if you're under enormous stress. So it's hard to experience stress and keep it all together. But she told me that. And for me, I realized, just like one of the people in my book, Bria Larson, a former Olympian gold medalist, I actually use stress in a way that's advantageous. Like it actually like gets me to that place where I have enormous focus and I can run faster. I'm not saying I'm looking for it, but I'm just saying I'm not going to run away from it, because those are the greatest lessons I've gotten in my career when I've had those deadlines created, written a book, all
Mm-hmm.
stressful. But yeah, I've been able to handle it.
Oh, that's a good one there. And then our last one, as I shared with you, this season is all about folks overcoming self-sabotage, stopping to, well, let go of a dead past and really stop undermining their happiness. So what's one last piece of advice you'd offer to someone who's struggling, a mother that's out there struggling, but wants to stop with undermining their own happiness?
Yeah, the most actionable and the most fulfilling piece of advice is to play with your child. The day that you feel like you're just not having it, or you're going to risk it or burn it all down, or just in that emotional sort of space where you just don't feel so good, I would encourage you to choose that moment to play with your child, because as one of my guests in the podcast and also in the book says, Jeff Ballo, he said, who knows if your child holds the missing puzzle piece to your own life's puzzle.
Mm, I've heard someone say like very similar, like kids are the joy of the world. So, being able to like learn from them, take from them, absorb that energy and that love that they share can be really revitalizing for anyone out there. So, Melissa, with that said, like I kind of know, but what's next for you? Where can people go to learn more about you, the book, the podcast?
Yeah, so I mean what's next for me? I am 100% planning on going to Egypt, to be honest. That is in my book. I have that in my preface. That was the vision that I had from my fertile imagination. I want to go to, one of the world's first libraries in, Alexandria, and I want to actually put my book Fertile Imagination on a shelf. Like that is the vision I had that kept me going for 2 years, beyond the fact that it was a book for moms who I hold so closely to my heart and my own personal experience. If you want to purchase the book, go to fertileideas.com. If you want to follow me, I'm at Melissa Llarena. And in terms of the podcast, right now, I am really focusing in on a lot of moms, and I want to be sure that our wellness needs are addressed in a proactive and holistic manner. So, if anyone is interested in having that conversation in terms of nutrition, mental health, mindfulness, in terms of, creativity and being as imaginative as humanly possible in your own form of artistry, I'm open to those conversations. You could find my podcast, Unimaginable Wellness, on all platforms, and it's going to be a blast. So definitely once that Egypt trip is done and scheduled, it is going to be all over social media. So wish me luck and just cheer me on.
That is exciting to hear, Melissa, you bringing that to life. And again, my fellow New Yorker, I'm just so appreciative of you for your time today, being able to just share with moms again how they can reignite and tap back into that reservoir of creativity and ambition that they have. Being a mom is not an all or nothing privilege, and there's so much more that they can continue to do with their lives. And you have shared and used your story and the stories that you offer in the book as examples of how they could do that in addition to creating a process. We'll be sure to include everything about the book, podcast, where they could find you, all in the show notes as well, Melissa. So thanks again for your time today.
Thank you so much, Justin. This was amazing. And I love your shirt. Pay yourself first. I firmly believe in that.
Yes, thank you. Well, folks, that is it for today's show. I'd like to thank you again for your presence and tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share the Living Once Twice podcast on LinkedIn, Instagram, or wherever, leaving us a review on iTunes, Spotify, and go visit that YouTube channel where you'll get to see Melissa and I's video in the YouTube channel. So after that said, reaching out to you all through the time and the space that separates us to say, remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Catch you later on Living Once Twice.